Hello everyone. This is the 12th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 45, Fax Machine, Plans for Monopoly, Anno Make. Back to the time when Quinn was still in Hogwarts, and he had some time at hand. He stood in his workshop flipping through a small notepad, looking for ideas. The tiny notepad in his hand was where Quinn noted down the random project ideas that came to him. Let's see, typewriter, not today. A charmed pair of hands for a piano duet? Maybe when I am bored out my mind. Thermal vision eye drops, oh, this sounds interesting. But I don't have the ingredients. Artificial magical eye. This will need a lot of research. After bouncing off some ideas, Quinn finally found something that interested him and was doable for the time constraints. Fax machine, spoke Quinn, rubbing his thumb over the page. Fax machine, meaning a scanner and printer. Two or more nodes connected to each other, Quinn began mumbling as he sat down on the bar stool in his workshop. After contemplating for a few minutes, Quinn stood up and clapped his hands. Okay, let's go with this. He closed his notepad and took out a sheet of paper for drafting the rough idea. First, let's decide how to connect two device nodes to each other, said Quinn as he uncapped his fountain pen and started to write. I would have to make use of the protean charm to synchronize the two devices, but what should be the part to be synchronized? Quinn got up and moved towards a drawer full of scrap metals. He took out two spare pieces of copper from his scrap pile and transmuted them into identical square chips. With his chin resting on his palm, Quinn charmed the square chips with the protean charm. Here we go, said Quinn as he touched one of the copper chips, and it turned to show a picture of an eagle. He glanced at the other copper chip and saw the same eagle picture on it. Protean charm was the charm that Hermione Granger used to link fake coins to communicate with the members of Dumbledore's army. A change in one fake galleon, in her case, a master coin, would be magically reflected in the others so that when Harry Potter transfigured his charmed coin to show a new date for a DA meeting, all the other coins would also exhibit the same changes. I will need to formulate a customized version of Protean Charm, noted Quinn as he thought of things to accomplish. Quinn needed to create a charm that would be scalable, which meant that he needed to figure out a way to add new devices to the existing networks of fax devices. I also need to figure out how to direct and isolate signals to particular devices. Another challenge was that, unlike in Dumbledore's army coins, Quinn didn't need a master device that signaled all other coins. Quinn needed to create a method to send signals to intended devices so that not everyone would get a message for just one device. Well, that wouldn't be much of a problem. At least, I hope it wouldn't be a problem, murmured Quinn. Arithmancy models were needed to develop a customized version of a spell. He needed to define how the magic would be molded to create the intended effect. Then there were things like if he wanted to use runes in the artifact or if he wanted to stick to charms. Then there were things like how he was going to use Protean Charm for scanning and printing. In the Dumbledore's army coins, the changes happened when the master coin was transfigured, but Quinn needed the device to detect the ink on paper and work from there. There were many things that Quinn needed to consider for making the entire system work. Let's start from the top up, said Quinn and started to draft the schematics for the plan. George looked at the 2 pages in front of him, and other than the slight difference in ink, the contents on the pages were precisely identical. He looked up from the pages and asked, how does it work? Quinn pulled a stool and sat in front of the table. He pointed his fake wand at the magical fax machine, and all heard a click from both the boxes. The copper insides of the devices levitated out their wooden frame and floated for all to see. I won't go into details, but the device is a clever usage of Protean Charm, Transmigration, some light spells, and few other things needed to sum up all of it, Quinn said as he took a blank page and drew a letter envelope on it. Quinn waved his fake wand, and the lower part of the paper tray slot came out, revealing the upper wall of the paper slot. You can't see it, but the upper wall of the slot where you insert the paper has thousands of pores thinner than human hair, and just above the upper wall of the paper slot, there is a hollow space filled with ink. He placed the paper on the top of the scanner of the other fax prototype and said, now, watch. There was a blue glow below the paper before it turned green. When the light turned green, George and Leah watched as the exposed upper wall of the second fax prototype transfigured to make a protrusion in the shape of the drawn envelope. You see the shape of the envelope? The next part is when the pores in the copper would open up to eject a tiny amount of ink, Every pore in this envelope-shaped outdent would eject some ink to print the envelope onto a new sheet. Right now, I froze the ink inside, so you can't see the ink come out, explained Quinn. He had taken the impression of the printer part of the magical apparatus from the inkjet printer technology, and imitated the way they printed images onto paper. Whatever text or image is scanned on the first machine, the second would copy it out on a new page. And, you noted the speed, it completed the process within seconds, spoke Quinn as he reattached the removed part of the paper slot and lowered the copper insides into the wooden case. George tapped his finger on the table before asking, "The idea is interesting, but this won't work in the real world. This is too limited." Quinn smiled and pointed at the magical fax replica. "This right here is just a proof of concepts. I have schematics and models for a practical version ready to be constructed. I just need the materials, and I can deliver in a week tops." The practical version would be much like a traditional photocopier with different paper sizes, protocols that would not allow printing if there was no paper. Leah chimed in and asked, "How many of these can you connect to each other? And, do you have a way to specify who the copy goes to?" Quinn smirked and responded, "There is no limit to how many of these I can connect to each other. Even if we create as many as magicals on this planet, there will be no problem in connectivity. Magic didn't have connectivity issues like electric and phone lines. There would be no busy lines or slow connections. The only limit was how fast Quinn's magical printer could print the pages. Everything else was instantaneous as magic didn't have the processing limitations of a computer. And, yes, I have a way to decide how to send the message to a specific person. I am thinking of using a combination of 3 letters and 5 digits. That would give us a total of over 1 billion, preciously 175760000 combinations to assign, meaning we can create 1 billion of these machines. The sender would dial in the code assigned to the receiver to send the message to the correct person." George hummed before asking, "How long will it take someone to copy the product?" Quinn shrugged and replied, "It depends. If it is someone smart, they can figure it out within a couple of months. If I put in some effort, then I can extend that by a couple of months. If I really put my mind to it, it would take someone much better than me closer to a year's worth of time." George stayed silent for a moment before saying, "That is an excellent margin. We can work with that. How much time would it take to train some people to build these?" Quinn shrugged. "Once again, it would depend on the person's skills. I can build these myself till you can train some people. I will build a manual for that." George nodded, and Leah suggested, "How about we first test these out in our offices and shops? Get their opinions and see if it works well in a real workplace environment." Quinn was okay with that and actually supported it. Getting the product tested before rolling it out to the public was standard procedure, and it would help the product development. In the end, the product would improve before the initial release. George and Leah started to discuss how to proceed from here on, and Quinn just smiled. They didn't notice, he thought before revealing the greatest feature of the product, one that was much bigger than a simple scanner and copier. "Grandfather, Leah, you are missing something out," said Quinn. Both of them looked at Quinn, and Leah asked, "What are you talking about?" "You asked me how a sender will send the message to a particular person," spoke Quinn. Leah nodded. "You said that every piece would be assigned a code. But, what about that?" A smile bloomed on Quinn's face, "And, we will be the one to assign those codes to the devices and add those pieces to the network." George's eyes widened as he continued for Quinn. "A network that would be maintained by us, but that means..." He understood what Quinn was talking about. Quinn chuckled and said while looking at George, "It doesn't matter if some copies our design and launch a product of their own. We control the network that connects all the devices. Without the network and connections, they are nothing but scanners and copiers with no communication capabilities. And anyone could use a Geminio charm if they want a temporary copy. Even if someone copies our product, they would be too late as we already have an established network, and if they want to sell their version, they would have to come to us for the connection." Leah spoke with a thoughtful look on her face. "I have designed a runic artifact that would work as connection hubs for the entire network. In easier words, it works like the ward stone used to anchor the wards and protective charms to a building or area. These will also solve the distance problem with faraway countries. Ward stones were an application of runic magic to cast powerful wards and protective spells to an area. The ward stones provided the protective wards and spells the magic to keep working and were a versatile piece of magic. Hogwarts had a ward stone that held numerous wards like anti-apparition wards to protect the castle. Quinn stood on from his stool and bowed, and, with this, I finish my sales presentation. George and Leah stared at him with a shocked expression. Quinn had just given them something that would establish them as a monopoly in this business. A monopoly share or complete market domination in an industry with extremely high potential. Quinn turned towards the door from where Elliot was watching and walked towards him with one hand raised high. Elliot raised his hand in response, and the two shared a loud high five. "That's how you do it," said Quinn with umph in his voice and a grin in his voice. After that, he turned back and asked, "Oh yeah, how much are you going to pay me for this?" George stared at Quinn and asked, "How much do you want?" "Double the amount in my student trust vault," responded Quinn, staring into George's eyes. "Deal," finished George, not taking any time to consider the offer. "Nice," said Quinn, giving his grandfather a thumbs up. "Oh, make extra, I don't know." Quinn and Leah came out from a screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark and asked, "So, how did you like it?" "It was good, right?" His eyes twinkled as he looked up at Leah, expecting a glowing remark from Leah. Leah hummed in response before speaking, "It was nice, but Indiana Jones didn't play a part in the movie." Quinn frowned, but then chuckled, "Oh, Leah. You must misunderstand things. The person with the fedora and the whip is Indiana Jones." "Oh, Leah, what would you do without me?" His eyes shined, and he suggested, "On that point, let's get me a fedora. I want to see how they are made so that I can make my own." Leah sighed and said, "I know who Indiana Jones is, but if he weren't in the movie, the Nazis would have still found the Ark, taken it to the island, opened it up, and all died, just like they did. Indiana Jones didn't need to be in the movie." Quinn's jaw dropped as he stared at Leah in shock. He raised his index finger and uttered, but had no point to make. Leah gently placed a finger under Quinn's chin and slowly closed his mouth for him. "Sorry about that, kiddo." Quinn just stared at Leah, his mind going blank for the shock he just received. Leah had boggled Quinn's mind, so to unboggle it, he did what was required. He spent hours to completely immerse himself in the film's memory. The film Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of the few memories on which Quinn had accomplished complete immersion. He could recall every scene of the movie in his head. But it wasn't enough. Quinn went a step further and went to a couple more screenings that showed extra footage to find any clue. He attended every screening that promised to show unshown footage. Quinn talked to fellow enthusiasts about the film, and sometimes in frustration, he would tell them what Leah had said to him, destroying their moods in the process. The question plagued Quinn's thoughts as, over time, one of his room's walls was covered with plot points, sketches of scenes straight out of memory, questions that needed to be solved, discussion with people he met during the screening, and gatherings he visited. A bright red yarn connected everything on the walls, making it seem like an investigation board of a crime in the police station. And finally, one day, he found something. A ray of hope that illuminated his world arrived. A scene that didn't make it to the last cut and gave the proof that Indiana Jones had some influence on the final result. "Ha ha 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 ha," laughed Quinn, maniacally. He immediately set afoot and sent a message to Leah through the magical fax machine, which they were currently calling the Westmail. "Dear sister, I wholeheartedly believe you are wrong, and it relates to a scene that isn't in the movie. I know for a fact that Nazis had the incorrect length staff because they only had one side of the headpiece. I saw this scene in an extended cut of the movie. Not only that, but the second side of the headpiece contains more info than just the correct staff length. Also written on the backside are instructions not to look into the Ark. This is how Indy knows to keep your eyes shut when the Ark is opened. So, in theory, I am correct, and you are wrong. Take that. Love. Quinn." Quinn smirked when he sent the message, glad that he had shown that the masterpiece film couldn't be wrong. Her reply came later that evening in a brief message. "Quinn." "Huh, what are you talking about?" "Leah." Quinn stared at the message in his hand. It made him realize he might be the only one getting worked up on this topic. He looked at the wall with red yarn and loads of paper on the wall and then looked at his hands. "What have I become?" Chapter 46, Upcoming Year, and Testing Out Wards. The designated room for Quinn's magic in the West Manor was a spacious hall with ample space and had sturdy walls, ceiling, and floor just in case magic hit the walls. The sturdy walls would prevent damage to anything outside the hall, protecting the structure of the entire manor. In that hall, with no decor or furniture, Quinn sat in the dead center. He sat in the lotus position, his back straight and eyes closed. The room was dead silent, with not a single sound that could disturb the peace. In the middle of summer, Britain was always hot. While it was because of the heat, the main factor that really made the summers uncomfortable was the humidity content in the air, which made the entire experience uncomfortable. And even in that humid climate, Quinn dispersed more and more conjured water into the air of the room, slowly increasing the moisture content in the room to where the water droplets dripped from the walls. But Quinn didn't stop and kept on pumping more water in the form of thin mist. He even made it so that the water won't condense and start dripping in excess, and the air would retain more and more liquid. At some point, Quinn felt that if he increased the humidity content of the room, it would get difficult to breathe, so he stopped dispersing more water into the air. He stopped and instantly changed gears. Instead of dispersing water, Quinn was releasing cold energy and escalating the chill as the cold built up in the room. The room's temperature dropped as water in the room condensed, and the humidity in the air formed a hazy white mist. The floor around Quinn froze and started to spread outwards, slowly creeping towards the walls. As the temperature dropped below the point where warming spells were proving to be inefficient, Quinn turned to blood magic to warm up his blood, and it came easy as breathing because he had experience using it daily for months. And the current level of cold was nothing compared to the icy vault that was colder than any natural spot on the planet. Currently, Quinn wasn't even trying to push his blood magic and kept it on the down low to be comfortable in the current temperature. I need more water. With that thought, Quinn, once again dispersing more water into the air, but unlike the previous dispersion, which was gradual and gentle, Quinn pushed his magic to create waves and waves of dispersed water. He also kept rolling out the cold energy, and because of it, the dispersed water instantly turned into mist, and the visibility in the room dropped because of the white fog everywhere. With each passing minute, the walls, floors, and ceiling of the hall started to show deposits of ice sheets, getting thicker with time and renewed water supply in the form of mist. Slowly, the hall looked a lot like the icy vault, albeit not as cold. The walls were a frozen icy blue, and the scene looked from the time of the Ice Age. Quinn stood up from his spot, looked around, and sighed a white plume. I need to be much quicker than this. Quinn's third year at Hogwarts was going to be a dangerous one. Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort's first Horcrux, was going to wreak havoc in Hogwarts by releasing the Slytherin's monster from the Chamber of Secrets. I need to be much faster than if I want to escape from the basilisk, murmured Quinn. The basilisk was a giant serpent, grander than any known snake species. It was known to be the king of serpents, a snake species that could be the apex predator in most ecosystems and food chains. The basilisk wasn't a naturally growing creature and needed a magical person's assistance to give birth to. Herpo the Fowl was the first one to breed a basilisk. He accomplished this by hatching a chicken egg beneath a toad, which resulted in the creature known as a basilisk. But just putting an egg under a toad wasn't enough. Extremely harsh conditions were needed to breed the king of serpents. Everything from the toad's type, age, gender, and various other specifications, to the hen who laid the chicken egg used, were harshly stringy. The egg and toad needed to be perfect and compatible with each other, and the magical breeding the basilisk required to maintain constant care for a basilisk to be perceived. It was nature's way to limit a magical beast like basilisk to spread its population on Earth. In exchange for the transcendent abilities, natural law took from the basilisk the capabilities to breed on its own, and needed assistance from another species to come into this world. Looking a basilisk directly in the eye causes instant death, but an indirect look will merely render the victim petrified. Because of these deadly capabilities, it was categorized as an XXXXX creature, meaning it was a known wizard killer that couldn't be domesticated because of its immense powers. Quinn didn't want to confront a beast that could kill him with a look, and he didn't want to be petrified for most of the school year just because he wanted to meet one. I am staying the hell away from the damn monster, was the decision Quinn made when he thought about the upcoming school year. He had given thought to the feasibility of taking the dairy turned into Horcrux from Ginny Weasley, and throw it away into the room of lost things and forget all about the basilisk incident. The plan was totally doable if Quinn moved quickly and took the diary from Ginny around the start of the year, but this plan wasn't foolproof as Ginny Weasley had the Horcrux diary for around a month before she came to Hogwarts. He didn't know how much influence the Horcrux had on Ginny Weasley. Heck, he wasn't even sure if what the books depicted were the full capabilities of the Horcrux diary. Then there was the whole issue of destroying the Horcrux. Room of Requirements had surprisingly less information on Horcrux. Quinn knew how to create a Horcrux. He even knew that Fiendfire could destroy the Horcrux, but there was nothing more than that on Horcrux destruction. Basilisk's venom wasn't listed in the text he had written, and that was a surprise. This told Quinn that basilisk venom was a new and accidental discovery. But Quinn didn't have basilisk's venom as the serpent was still sleeping in the Chamber of Secrets, and he didn't have expertise over the use of Fiendfire that destroyed a Horcrux. Quinn hadn't even attempted to practice casting the Cursed Flames. He didn't want to fire Fiendfire and kill himself in the process. And, for that, he was practicing the ice magic. The basilisk might be a magical beast, and the King of Serpents, in the end, was a snake. It was a widely known fact that snakes didn't like cold weather, and a basilisk wasn't any different. He was trying to produce instant ice and drop the temperature of an area in a short period. Snakes were sensitive to cold, and Quinn hoped that if he dropped the surrounding temperature when he walked around the castle, the basilisk would stay away. If it did get close, then I would just have to terrorize it away with the cry of a rooster, said Quinn, planning to transfigure tons of roosters to kill the shit out of the basilisk. But Quinn wanted to avoid that because if by chance the basilisk escaped death by fleeing through the pipes, then young Tom Riddle would know his identity, and it would directly put him in harm's way. So, as the saying went, prevention is better than the cure. Quinn wanted to keep the basilisk away from him rather than confronting it and taking a chance to kill it. He wasn't even sure if the basilisk would show on Reckon, so to make sure that it stayed away, Quinn had to make sure that Giant Snake stayed the hell away from him. Quinn exhaled in the room, which was now sealed by the ice layers, covering every inch of the room. Something like this would work, said Quinn. He combed a hand through his hair and sighed, I have to get better at this. Oh boy, this is going to take a lot of magic to sustain, doesn't it? Quinn smiled as he thought about the expenditure of magic. It was not every day he could use magic that took copious amounts of magic, big even for Quinn's reserves. While Quinn was smiling at the prospect of using magic-heavy ice magic, the door of the training hall busted open with a loud blast. Wow! Quinn was so shocked that he let out a long startled yelp. He jumped back and looked at the busted door. Young Master. Are you all right? Quinn recognized Elliot's voice and immediately adjusted blood magic so that it wasn't visible on his face, or any exposed part of his skin. Yeah. I am all right, exclaimed Quinn, with his hand on his heart, feeling the erratic pulse. Elliot looked inside the frozen solid room, his eyes wide because of the scene. It was not every day that you witnessed something like this in the smack middle of summer. What was that, Uncle Elliot? Why did you do that? Said Quinn, pointing at the broken door covered in ice. Elliot looked at Quinn, his hands went his waist as he frowned. Young Master, when I came here, I saw that the door had layers of ice on it. I tried to call out for you, but you didn't respond. He steered his hands at the broken door and continued, when I tried to open the door, it won't budge, so I had no choice to break it open. I was worried that something might have gone wrong. Quinn scrunched his nose as he looked at the ice-sealed room and could understand the problem. Oops, said the fool, showing the silly expression. Elliot just stared at Quinn, standing in the frozen room, not knowing what to think. And while learning cold magic to prepare for life preservation at Hogwarts was fun, Quinn needed something else to do, and in his curiosity, he took up warding as the theme for the summer break. The backyards and gardens were meticulously maintained by the combined effort of Elliot and the house elf, Polly. Those two worked together to grow the grass fields and gardens in the West Manor. The area around the mansion increased the beauty of the building, giving it a regal look. They would be devastated if something disturbed the lush greens and blossoming herbs, perennials, and other flora. Fire repellent wards, let's try these, said Quinn, goofily smiling while standing on the beautiful grass. A fire that could ruin the effort put into making the grass look luscious. Quinn raised his hand, and a red layer of magic originated from it, forming a dome of warding magic. The red layer glowed a little brighter before disappearing. Warding magic was a branch of magic that could be performed employing either charms or runes or both. A type of barrier magic that rejected phenomenon within the bounds of the barriers. Protective enchantments that exerted control inside the area under the barriers of magic. For example, in the Room of Lost Things, an anti-summoning ward covered the entire room that rejected summoning spells in the room. Hogwarts was covered with anti-apparition that didn't allow apparition for humans. He looked above the space of fire resistance barrier, and a light wisp of fire manifested in the air. "Let's hope this works," said Quinn as he dropped the fire. The wisp of fire fell down, and the moment it touched the now invisible barrier, a patch of it shone red. Quinn smiled as the wisp of fire exhausted itself before it hit the ground. Excellent. He upped the ante and dropped multiple wisps of fire, and every single one of them snuffed out by the magic of the ward. The wisps of fire increased in number until the entirety of the barrier was facing a barrage, and did a great job at snuffing every single wisp. Quinn showed an impressed expression and decided to take it to the next level. He stepped back, and gone were the wisps of fire. Quinn raised his hand and jets of flames came out of them colliding with the barrier, and the moment the jets passed the barrier, it snuffed the fire out of existence. He continued to raise the amount and temperature of the fire. While Quinn was happy to see the ward stand up to the flames, he frowned when the heat and quantity of flames exceeded the current spell's capabilities. One thing Quinn hated was the inefficient use of magic. It was one of his best pet peeves. If a magic was supposed to go from 1 to 10, then Quinn hated when it was used to go to 11. It was inefficient for a spell to exceed its limits. In theory, you could push magic into a base-level fire spell like the Incendio spell to produce extremely hot flames, but you could also use a high-level fire spell to achieve the same result with much less magic. Quinn clicked his tongue and stopped the jets of fire, thus ceasing the testing of the maximum capabilities of the fire-repellent ward. Any more than this, and I would enter danger category. While Quinn was ballsy enough to use fire magic in the backyard, he wasn't ballsy enough to risk testing the ward he had casted for the first time and damaging the pasture. With a casual wave, the ward broke down. Quinn turned back to walk to a book on warding. Water repellent, lightning repellent, explosion repellent, room sterilization wards, that will come in handy. Quinn turned the pages in the book, looking at warding charms he could try, and found an interesting one. "Oh, this might be fun," said Quinn, packing his stuff and heading towards the mansion. Elliot sat in the living room, sitting down for his afternoon tea. As usual, he had the most traditional tea setup. An afternoon treat of tea, sandwiches, scones, and cake. A lot of choices to choose from served on special platters. Elliot looked left and right before taking out a pair of glasses from his pocket, the type that hung from the chain. He put them on, setting them on the bridge of his nose. Peering through them at a newspaper, holding a newspaper with a pen, doing the daily crossword. Opposite to Elliot sat Quinn under an invisibility ward. Looking at Elliot with wide eyes, more specifically, he was looking at Elliot's glasses. Merlin's beard, he had glasses. "I didn't know that," thought Quinn. "Man, that is a lot of sugar in your tea. And you said that honey is better." Invisibility ward was a simple warding spell that captured an image of everything inside the barrier. And, when you entered the warded area, it would hide you by displaying a static image of what it captured. Quinn casted an invisibility ward on the part of the sofa Quinn was going to sit on and let the ward take a still of everything under the barrier. And, when he sat down under the ward, he was not visible to any on the outside. That whole day, Quinn sat in different parts of the house, observing people in the manor. He found that Ms. Rosie liked to read romantic novels in her free time. It was the greatest shock of the day as he never expected the always serious Ms. Rosie to find entertainment in cheesy romance novels. Polly, the house elf, liked to spend her break time in the different parts of the house, experimenting with various elf magics in cooking, cleaning, gardening, laundry, and other household activities. Quinn had seen some awful results of the experiment, and he felt a little closer to her as Quinn, too, had his share of failed experiments. Unfortunately, all fun things came to an end when Quinn sat in the home bar on the manor, waiting for his grandfather to come here to relax like he did every other evening. Like clockwork, George came to the home bar and walked to the cellar for his choice drink of the evening. Quinn silently waited for his grandfather to come back, and when he did, everything went black for Quinn. When Quinn came back up, he was still sitting in the seat he had taken before everything went black. Groaned Quinn, sitting up in the chair. "What the hell happened?" asked Quinn to no one. "I stunned you," came the reply he wasn't looking for. Quinn looked to the side to see his grandfather with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Quinn sat right up, feeling embarrassed and mortified. "Sorry," he eked out, looking at his grandfather, his expression both awkward and meek. "What were you doing under that ward?" came a question from George. Quinn pursed his lips before answering, trying it out. "I have been doing it all day. Looking at others while under the ward." George sighed. "You are lucky that I only stunned you. I could have done much worse. I am sorry." "It is all right. Just be more careful while using magic and keep the mischief to the minimum. Now, you may leave." "I want to enjoy my drink in peace," said George, taking a sip of his whiskey. Quinn was quite happy to oblige, standing up with a slight wince and walking towards the door, but before he exited, Quinn asked, "What gave me away?" George looked at his grandson and saw a look of strange curiosity. He recognized the look on Quinn's face, seeing the expression quite a few times on his grandson's face. It was the expression that showed Quinn's cold curiosity towards topics that interested Quinn. In times like these, Quinn was surprisingly single-minded, purely wanting to know the answers to his question. The lighting was different. "I brightened the flames of the candles in the room when I entered." "I am guessing, but your ward didn't account for that," answered George, watching as the wheels turned in his grandson's mind. "Thank you, and once again, I apologize." After saying that, Quinn left the room, leaving George alone. Once again, reminding George that Quinn loved magic. Chapter 47, Thestrals, and Carriage Ride. In the last 2 years, Hogwarts had firmly become the nucleus of his operation. The Room of Requirement provided him with precious knowledge and a covert place to practice all kinds of magic, some that were not looked upon highly. While his AID workshop was a place that he had built on his own, it was a room where everything was according to his preference. Then there was his suitcase, his expanded suitcase that housed his library, the library that contained books from all around the world, and Quinn's obsession with magic kept the library ever expanding. So, while Quinn was sad a little to leave the West Manor and his family, he was happy to return to Hogwarts. At Hogwarts, Quinn could do whatever he wanted, and with some care, no one would ever know what he was doing. The Hogwarts Express reached the Hogsmeade station, and Quinn deboarded the train. Like always, Quinn stepped onto the damp platform of the station. "It's like it rains here on every 1st of September, he muttered, looking at the small shallow puddles littered across the platform. Quinn watched the numerous students moving to the carriages that went to Hogwarts. He followed the crowd, and just like everyone, he got in a carriage. Suddenly, it began raining, and a roof sprung from the back of the carriage, covering the previously open carriage. "Yep, it rains every single year," said Quinn, looking at the groups of students hurrying to find a carriage. He turned his attention to the beings pulling the carriages. Thestrals. The Thestrals were a breed of winged horses with skeletal-like bodies, faces with reptilian features, and wide, leathery wings that resembled bats. "Omens of misfortune," whispered Quinn, watching the sinister and spooky appearance of the magical beasts. He wasn't sure why he could see the Thestrals. Maybe it was because he had seen the original Quinn die, or maybe it was because he was in this body, which meant that he had died in his original world. "Not that I could remember any of it," whispered Quinn, his tone hiding the bitterness he was feeling. But the reality was that he could see the Thestrals, and they reminded him how he got here. Original Quinn, he recalled how he addressed the previous host of the body and the identity which he had taken over. He had long gotten used to the identity of Quinn West. He was Quinn West and responded to the name. He truly felt that he was Quinn West, and had stopped thinking about his previous life identity, ceased the efforts to figure who he was before, and had accepted that both the past him and the original Quinn had died. But, time like these when he came across beings like Thestrals brought those thoughts to the surface, and his own self tried to pull himself in a spiral of doubt, guilt, and confusion. Every thought that disturbed him during the first couple of years in this world would try to drag him into a pit of negativity. "Ah, damn it. Why am I like this?" Quinn murmured in slight self-loathing, leaning forward till his elbows touched his thighs and covered his eyes with his hands. exhaling heavily, trying to get himself out of this mood. He didn't want to feel like this and hated when it happened. "Hey, I found a carriage with space. Come on, let's just get on this one." Quinn immediately sat up straight and inhaled deeply to make sure that nothing seemed out of the sort. Looking to the side, Quinn saw a red-haired girl board the carriage, followed by another girl, who was hurrying like the first one did to get out of the rain. Quinn put on a slight smile and watched the two girls breathing in relief that they had escaped the rain, and had successfully found shelter against the downpour. He immediately recognized the two girls, had met them last year. One of them finally looked at him, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Ms. Potter," greeted Quinn. The redhead Ivy Potter looked stunned and surprised to see Quinn sitting in the carriage they had chosen. The brunette also looked at Quinn, and her eyes showed recognition. Quinn turned to her and greeted her the same, "Ms. Granger." The carriage started moving, and silence settled inside the carriage. None of the three people spoke a single word to each other. Ivy stared at Quinn with a sharp look in her eyes. She had suspected Quinn since the last year. First, he gave them the information about Nicholas Flamel, which didn't arouse her suspicion. Quinn aroused her suspicion when he warned her about the Stone's chambers, like he already knew why she was looking for the information on Nicholas Flamel. Then they met by accident in the hospital wing when she was visiting her brother with her family. He had given her a look that said he already knew about what had happened. It made her wonder how he knew Harry got injured in the Stone's chambers when that information wasn't public until a few days later. To Ivy, Quinn West was a person who acted like he knew everything about everything. Hermione Granger also glanced at Quinn West, but not one of suspicion like Ivy. Her glances were of curiosity and wonder. She had heard of Quinn from almost all her professors about how Quinn was intelligent and was a model student. On multiple occasions, Professor Flitwick had given her a copy of Quinn's assignments while returning her graded versions of her assignments. His assignments were always shorter than her, and he didn't quote phrases from books, or at least from the ones she had read. Quinn's assignments always had points that seemed obvious but were insightful in nature. Then there were his exam notes, which she had bought because almost all Ravenclaw students talked about them, and she had been exposed to Quinn's charms assignments throughout the year, so she bought a set. The notes were helpful for her exam preparation, so she was extremely curious about the person known as Quinn West. Quinn broke the silence in the carriage by addressing Hermione. "Ms. Granger, before I forget, I missed the chance to congratulate you for scoring the highest last year. You must have worked hard. So, congratulations." Hermione blinked a few times before replying, "Thank you. Same to you as well." She felt surprised that Quinn congratulated her. She wasn't expecting a congratulation, and not from Quinn, who she barely knew, at least personally. Quinn turned to Ivy and said, "You too, Ms. Potter. I heard you scored high as well." He was being polite despite the not-so-positive looks from Ivy. "Yes, I did," was all the green-eyed redhead said, still blatantly staring at Quinn. And the blatant staring made Quinn feel a tad bit uncomfortable, but he didn't show it and moved on to the next person. Ivy stared at the boy sitting in front of her. He had changed little from last year. He had grown a little taller, but other than that, Quinn West hadn't physically changed. The same neatly cut black hair and the stone-grey eyes that shone brightly. "Last year, did you go inside the restricted part of the third-floor corridor?" Ivy asked directly, with no warning or poking around. The words coming out of her couldn't be more direct. "Ivy!" exclaimed Hermione. She didn't mind the question, but she was a little shocked at the direct confrontation. But she did glance at Quinn after her initial shock, wanting to know the answer to the question. "And why do you ask that question, Ms. Potter?" replied Quinn, answering the question with a question. He wanted to know her intentions. "You said that the restricted area was dangerous," said Ivy, but when Quinn was about to speak, she interrupted with her index finger up. "I clearly remember that you said that the headmaster wasn't joking when he said he warned about a painful death. So, don't give the excuse that you were following Professor Dumbledore's words. You said it like you were supporting him with your own experience." Quinn rested his hands in his lap and contemplated before answering. "I heard it from someone who may or may not have stumbled into the restricted area, and may not have opened the door to may or may not see an enormous beast, and that person may or may not have talked about it." Of course, I don't know who it was as I just happened upon a conversation and couldn't find the identity of the speaker. Ivy and Hermione gawked at Quinn with wide eyes. They couldn't believe the words that came out of Quinn's mouth. It was so full of bullshit that they didn't think that it was possible to give such an answer. "What in the flippin' dash?" exclaimed Ivy, mightily frowning, her eyes reflecting her expression, but Hermione cut her off and asked, "So, you are saying that you personally didn't go to the restricted area and just heard about it from someone?" Quinn shamelessly nodded with a wide grin on his face. He refused to acknowledge that he ever went exploring the Stone's chamber and had fun while denying it. "I am a rule-abiding student, Ms. Granger. I take rules seriously." He looked deeply at her and said, "You understand me, right?" Hermione nodded deeply, for a moment forgetting Quinn's answer and wholeheartedly agreeing with the importance of rules. Ivy stared at Hermione with an incredulous expression before shaking her head and turning to Quinn, her brows snapped together. "Do you really believe that anyone would accept such a ridiculous answer?" Quinn shrugged with the corners of his mouth turned up. "What can I say? Guess I was lucky to hear such an important piece of information. I figured even if it wasn't true, it was still wise to spread the news that the restricted corridor was dangerous." Ivy glanced up at the roof before looking at Quinn, her eyes bored into him. "Then how did you know about Nicholas Flamel?" Quinn's eyes sparkled as he replied to the question, "Oh, that? My sister studied at Beauxbaton's Academy of Magic, and Nicholas Flamel gives a lecture there every year. I know all about Nicholas Flamel from her." He peered at both the girls and smiled mysteriously. "Philosopher's Stone is an extraordinary creation, isn't it? The dream of eternal life right at your fingertips, the ability to turn any material into gold or anything material you desire, and the power to cure any disease in existence. Nicholas Flamel warrants more credit than he is credited." Ivy and Hermione were now 100% sure that Quinn had been inside the restricted area, and he knew what it hid. They couldn't get him to accept anything, but they couldn't be more sure that Quinn West had broken all the traps set by various professors with nobody knowing. Quinn decided to change the subject and inquired, "Tell me, Miss Granger, what do your parents do for a living?" Hermione was a little surprised by the sudden question but answered it nevertheless, "My parents are dentists." Ivy looked at Quinn and was about to explain what dentists were. She had a lot of exposure to the Weasley family and knew that purebloods could be grossly clueless about Muggle culture. But she didn't get to explain as Quinn spoke. "I haven't been to a dentist in my entire life. We don't have healers that specialize in dentistry." Quinn's time at home between school years was filled with healer visits for annual checkups and safety screenings. George West lost his wife to disease. He didn't want to lose anymore, so he was extremely strict with healthcare. "Do they own a practice?" asked Quinn, keeping up the conversation. "Yes, both my parents co-own a practice." Quinn nodded, already knowing answers to the question he was asking, but it was better than awkward silence, not that he minded the awkward silences. Quinn had thick enough skin to ignore such things. Ivy sat in her spot, stunned that Quinn knew about Muggle professions. She doubted the little information she had about Quinn West and asked, "You are a pureblood, right?" Quinn studied Ivy before answering, "Yes, why do you ask?" Nothing, was just wondering. Ivy didn't want to say that she didn't expect a pureblood to know about Muggle society. Even with her limited interactions with Quinn, Ivy knew he would jump on it and accuse her of stereotyping. "Is Professor Potter returning to Hogwarts this year?" asked Quinn, wondering if Lily Potter would be teaching Muggle studies again this year. "She is." "Why?" asked Ivy. "Oh, right." Hermione clapped her hands and asked, "You are in your third year, you get to choose electives. Have you taken Muggle studies as an elective?" Quinn shook his head. He would never attend Muggle studies classes at Hogwarts. An opinion that he had told the professor of Muggle studies to her face. "Oh no, I have selected arithmancy, care of magical creatures, and study of ancient runes for my electives." The decision of adding care of magical creatures to his electives alongside arithmancy and study of ancient runes was a long one. Quinn knew how to handle beast ingredients if given to him dead, but he didn't know what to do with live ones. Quinn wasn't sure if he wanted to learn about live ones. But after contemplating, he decided to take the class on care of magical creatures. "That makes 10 subjects. You will be getting 10 OWL in your 5th year," counted Hermione, getting excited at the prospect of taking tests. Well, I may take O.W.L exams in divination and Muggle studies if I feel like it. You don't have to take the classes to apply for O.W.Ls, said Quinn. Of course, these were just Hogwarts subjects. Quinn was determined to test for all kinds of O.W.L and N.E.W.T equivalent examinations in various countries for various branches of magic. He wanted to fulfill his vanity by getting all sorts of certifications from all over the world. The carriage stopped, signaling that they had arrived at the castle. Quinn got down from the carriage and helped the two girls get down, offering them his hand. Hermione shyly took his hand and thanked him. Quinn thought Ivy would refuse his hand, but she took it. Well, ladies, if you have any problems, you know where to find me. See you around, said Quinn before taking his leave. Ivy watched as Quinn left. Her eyes caught the glimmer of a golden ring Quinn was wearing on his left-hand middle finger. It shone faintly in the dark. She found herself staring at the ring but was brought out of her stare by Hermione. She turned to Hermione before looking at Quinn's back and once again to Hermione and asked, Hermione, did you notice the ring on West's hand? Hermione immediately nodded and answered, it was a charming ring, wasn't it? It glimmered beautifully. Yeah, it did, said Ivy, trailing off. Come on, we need to find the boys. They might have gone ahead of us, said Hermione. Ivy tossed her current chain of thought to the back of her head and replied, yeah, we need to find them. I want to ask where they were on the train. They made us go look for them all over the train. Quinn strutted to the great hall. Taking in the hall and its bewitched ceiling, hanging chandeliers, long tables, high table, students talking to each other, greeting other after a long summer break. Oh yeah, this is nice, said Quinn, smiling all the way to a spot on the Ravenclaw table. He adjusted his butt on the wooden bench and nodded, yep, this still sucks. But there was a smile on Quinn's face as he said it. Quinn. Quinn smiled and turned to watch Eddie jogging towards him. His arm raised, waving his hand. Carmichael, my main man. It had been a while, buddy, said Quinn, hugging Eddie. Eddie sat down beside Quinn and talked about their breaks. Eddie's family had gone to Spain for a family vacation. A few minutes later, Marcus joined the duo and sat across them, completing the usual trio's seating arrangement. Good evening, greeted Marcus. Quinn sized up Marcus and said, man, you grew in the break, didn't you? Among Marcus, Eddie, and Quinn, Quinn had been the tallest, but now Marcus had grown to become the tallest of the group. Yeah, kinda grew a little this break. Had to buy a lot of new clothes, replied Marcus, looking around. When will the sorting start? I am getting hungry. Quinn took out a cauldron cake from his robes and threw it across the table, got you covered. Marcus's eyes glittered with delight as he tore the wrapper off the sweet and took a huge bite. The in-house glutton spoke with cake in his mouth, thwank few. Eddie and Quinn laughed. They had gotten used to the lack of table manners from their friend. Eddie's eyes caught something, and he looked down at the table. He saw a gold ring on Quinn's hand and commented, since when did you start wearing that ring? Marcus also looked at Quinn's hand and remarked, oh, that looks cool. Quinn looked at the ring on his left hand. The gold of the ring, reflecting in his eyes. He faintly smiled and said, yeah, it is a new thing. The ring shone as Quinn closed his hand into a fist. Chapter 48, Setting Up Office, Lovegood, returned to the icy vault. After his first day at Hogwarts, the owner of AID Services walked to the office with a suitcase in hand. He hummed a tune as he inserted the key into the key slot, turning it to unlock the door. The lock clicked to release the bolt that secured the door to the frame. But the door wasn't unlocked, as there were a couple more things Quinn needed to do to unlock the door. He placed his hand on the door and funneled magic into the door. Before leaving last year, Quinn had fused the wood of the door to the wood of the frame by using transmutation, forming a weld between the woods of both structures. Lifting his hand up to lift up the 4 wooden planks that barred the door from opening. Finally, Quinn held the handle on the door and was about to push the door open when he got jolted with a stun of lightning. Foo dash, mother for dash, shit, bloody hell, Merlin's saggy balls, I forgot about that, heaved Quinn, his face all scrunched up in pain, clutching his hand and jumping up and down. There was a charm on the door handle that shocked anyone who touched it. Quinn angrily disabled the charm on the door after recovering from the shock. He grabbed the handle and was about to push the door but stopped. Did I place something else in there? After a few seconds of thinking, Quinn determined he was safe and entered the office. White sheets covered the entire office furniture, and some dust flew in the room because of the sudden disturbance of the open door. Quinn looked to the right and saw the big glass wall, which used to have a door slot to enter the workshop, but now didn't have a single opening. Quinn had sealed the door slot when he left for the summer break. He walked to the glass wall and touched it to transmute a door slot into the glass wall, making a rectangular opening into the glass. He stepped into the opening, entering the workshop, which too was covered in white sheets covering the table and cabinets. He sat down his suitcase on the floor and gathered his magic as he walked around the familiar room, smiling the entire time. Quinn clapped his hand once, and the room came to life as white sheets in the office and workshop flew up and folded themselves into a neat stack on the floor. A wave of magic hit the entire classroom turned office and workshop and cleaned every nook and cranny of the room, eliminating the dust in the room. Every drawer and door of every cupboard and cabinet opened and went through the same cleaning process, turning the entire room into a squeaky clean place. The suitcase on the floor fell to the side and opened up with a dozen or more clicks of locks unlocking. It took a while before things flew out of the suitcase. Various types of tools, vials of potions, reams of papers, other utensils, and all kinds of things that once filled the cupboards in the workshop once again took their rightful place in the workshop. Quinn again filled the file cabinets that he had emptied before leaving with documents and manila folders. In the office, decor adorned the walls, furnishing the look that Quinn had decided for the office. With a snap of fingers, the chandeliers on the roof lit up the room, everlasting candles shining the room with their flames. Now, this feels right, said Quinn. And, at last, Quinn looked at the door leaning against the glass wall. The door lifted itself and took its place in the glass wall, covering the opening in the wall. AID was back in business. Gilderoy Lockhart didn't make a positive first or any impression on Quinn. The entire first class, the pompous lying piece of phony lied his butt off about everything. He had wasted an hour of Quinn's time, and even though Quirrell and Binns did that last year, they weren't annoying as Lockhart. Quinn hated every second of his defense against dark arts class and had to hold the urge to stun the blonde bastard into oblivion. He spent an hour listening to the bragging that came out of Lockhart's mouth, and there was something about Lockhart's voice that Quinn couldn't ignore. It was like a mosquito's buzz, extremely annoying and hard to ignore. Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Dark Force Defense League, and 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. My ass, groaned Quinn, rubbing his temple, entering the Ravenclaw common room. He made a beeline to his favorite chair in the common room and stopped when he saw a first year sitting in his spot. Quinn stared at the chair and the first year sitting in it, and the first year noticed Quinn staring at him. The first year kid felt uncomfortable at being stared down by a senior. He looked around, wondering why Quinn was staring, and concluded that Quinn wanted to sit in the chair. He bounced up from the chair, not wanting to fight with an older student, and walked away from the spot, avoiding confrontation. Hey, kid, called out Quinn, causing the first-year Ravenclaw to freeze in his spot. He slowly turned to face and saw something thrown at him and instinctively caught it in his hand. The kid looked at his hands and saw chocolate sitting there. When he looked up at Quinn, he saw Quinn not looking at him and sitting down on the chair. Quinn sat down on his chair and thought, kids are weird. Not noticing the reason behind why the kid left the chair. Quinn slumped down in the chair and looked around the common room. When he looked to his side, he came across a pair of silvery eyes staring at him with a look of distinct dottiness. The girl was extremely close to him and almost startled him out of his chair. Can I have a chocolate? Asked the girl with silver eyes. Quinn studied at the girl, and it took a second, but Quinn recognized the girl. Stood in front of him, leaning down close to his face, was the girl with waist-length, straggly, dirty blonde hair and a feel about her that made her seem otherworldly. Luna Lovegood wanted chocolate. Quinn slowly took out a chocolate cube from his robes and placed it on Luna Lovegood's outstretched hand. She sat down on the chair beside him, unwrapped the sweet chocolate, and put the whole cube in her mouth. She turned to Quinn, and he could see the small chocolate cube poking against the inside of her cheeks as she put it aside to speak, "Thank you." Quinn nodded, observing Luna as if she was a rare creature, and extended his hand for a handshake. Quinn West, said Quinn, introducing himself. Luna looked at Quinn's hand for a moment before taking it with both her hands, turning it so that Quinn's palm was facing her. Is she reading my palm, thought Quinn, but let the blonde do whatever she was doing, finding her behavior interesting. Your hands are amusing, spoke Luna. Her voice had a dreamy quality. If her words and voice were solid, they would fly and float away like a feather in a breeze. Amusing? Asked Quinn, not knowing what she meant by it. He looked at his other hand to see if anything was amusing with it, but couldn't find anything particularly amusing. She nodded while tracing the lines on his palm with her fingers, very amusing. She moved the chocolate cube in her mouth before continuing, you love magic, don't you? You found that from my hand? Inquired Quinn, watching her still playing with his hand. She nodded, humming in agreement. Luna pulled on his fingers, popping knuckled while doing so, and smiling when his hand made popping sounds. I am sure that you would have no rackspurts around you. Your hands say so, said Luna, smiling in delight, but then frowned. I forgot my pair of spectrospecs at home, or else I would have been able to see them. Maybe I should write a letter to Daddy to send them to me. She suddenly looked at Quinn's face and asked, can I have one more chocolate? Quinn took another chocolate cube from his robes and put the cube on his other hand that was still in Luna's grasp. The ever-eccentric Luna requested something from Quinn, please unwrap it. Quinn unwrapped the chocolate with magic, making sure that he had his fake wand out. His eyes almost bulged out when Luna leaned forward and ate the chocolate straight from Quinn's hand. Thank you. It is quite delectable, said Luna, licking her lips that were stained with chocolate. You are welcome, said Quinn, not really sure how he should feel about the current situation. What is your name? Luna stared into Quinn's eyes, silver meeting stone grey. Usually, in these kinds of situations where he wasn't sure what to do, Quinn would take the opportunity to read the mind to get some hold of the conversation. But right now, he didn't have that in mind. My name is Quinn West, introduced Quinn, even though he already did it once. And, you are Luna Lovegood. Yes. She finally released Quinn's hand and now was staring at Quinn's face. Your father is the editor of Quibbler, right? Can I buy a subscription? Asked Quinn, trying to build a connection with Luna. Her stare changed a little as if looking for something. She looked at Quinn for a good while before nodding. I would need you to fill a form and pay the subscription fees. I will send it to Daddy. That's it? Asked Quinn. That's it, replied Luna. All right, thanks. Luna got up from her seat and left, saying nothing. Sitting in his chair, Quinn wondered what just happened. He met Luna Lovegood, gave her chocolate, had his palm read, got complimented that it was amusing, asked for a Quibbler subscription, and all this happened while he got caught up in Luna's pace. Was all he could come up with in the end. The first thing Quinn did after getting some free time was visiting the icy vault. The icy vault was as miserable as ever. A hellish cold place that no sane human would like to spend time in. Quinn silently put on thick layers of clothes that he specially stitched up himself for enduring the cold in the vault region. Putting on his glasses, he stepped down the stairs. His spiked boots provided Quinn with the grip needed on the iced floors. Immediately a freezing chill hit him, trying to sap the heat from his body, but Quinn fought back with blood magic heating up his blood throughout the body. The blood flowed through his body, keeping the body warm, sustaining his body in the harsh cold. Quinn walked towards the snowflake icicle, not minding the cold one bit. He had become used to it, and if Quinn ever thought about this fact, he would wonder what was wrong with him. He glanced at the snowflake, and it began to shake, and in one fell swoop, the ice came apart and changed into water vapor. The next second, the cloud vapor turned into a lump of magnesium metal, falling onto the frozen floor with a thump. Quinn's magic pushed on the gates with his magic, and halfway through, ice spears shot from inside with the sole intention of killing Quinn, but they stopped mid-flight and dropped to the ground as Quinn walked inside the vault. Immediately, the temperature changed, and Quinn's blood magic gradually adjusted his body temperature and brought it to a natural temperature, making sure that the sudden shift in condition didn't cause problems in his body. Immediately, Quinn shed down the layers of clothes and walked around the vault, observing absolute zero floating in mid-air, contained by the runes and charms inside the vault. All right, nothing has changed. Good, said Quinn as he retrieved a case from his clothes and kneeled on the floor, setting the case on the floor. With a single click, Quinn opened the case. Inside the container were 7 pieces of metal. Quinn took out 3 spherical metal balls from the case and looked around the vault, focusing on the vault walls. "Here goes nothing," said Quinn before rolling the ball on the ground. The 3 balls rolled their way in different directions. The movement of the 3 spheres was unnatural as they adjusted their path until they reached the decided spot and came to a sudden stop. The next second, the 3 spherical metal balls reconstructed themselves into 3 pyramids of similar sizes. If seen from above, the 3 pyramids were in a triangular position. Each one at the vertices of an equilateral triangle, with absolute zero in the middle of said triangle. Quinn took a deep breath before raising his hand in front of him. 3 soft streams of continuous magic made their way to a metal pyramid each. The pyramid started to glow in a green light. The light grew stronger until Quinn cut off the magic supply. "Okay, do your thing," whispered Quinn, hoping that his creation worked according to its purpose. The 3 pyramids started to hum, and after a few seconds, thin beams of green magic shot in different directions towards the vault's wall. Small bursts of magical light shot one by one, making contact with the vault's circular wall. Quinn inhaled a deep breath when he saw the runes etched into the wall glow in an icy blue light. Thousands of runes of various sizes illuminated the vault. Okay, it works," Quinn spoke fast and moved faster as he took the 3 more metal pieces from his case. These pieces were triangular discs, and Quinn slid them on the floor. They repeated the movements of the previous pieces and arranged themselves in a smaller triangle. The triangular metal discs received magic from Quinn, but this time the input was much more intense and longer, and the output was also much drastic. The triangular disc shot glowed and hummed just like the pyramids, and the intensity grew until the discs emitted circular waves of magic. Quinn clutched his hand when he felt the vault faintly shake and looked around with gleaming eyes as he watched the runes on the wall switch places, rearranging themselves on the wall. "Let this work," thought Quinn, his heart beating hard with both excitement and a tinge of fear. He had made thorough preparation with triple-checking every calculation and decision. But there was always a chance that thing would fail, and it would release absolute zero from its containment, killing him immediately. It took maybe 10 seconds before the runes stopped arranging themselves and the new arrangement glowed brighter with a burst before settling down. Quinn moved his eyes to his 6 pieces and urged, "Come on." The moment the thought ended, all 6 metal pieces shot continuous beams of magic towards the absolute zero. His breathing hitched as there was a screeching sound from the absolute zero, but nothing happened as everything calmed down. The 6 metal pieces, 3 pyramids, and 3 triangular discs were now connected to the rune formation of the room and absolute zero. Quinn exhaled heavily as he silently watched 6 beams of magic light connecting absolute zero with his metal structure. He made the metal structures with runic magic. He had etched runes into the metal composite, giving them the functionality to change the rune formation of the vault to add a feature of his choice. "Phew, that was stressful," said Quinn as he stood up from his spot and walked to the place just below the floating absolute zero. He had the last piece of metal in his hand. The last piece was a circular disc with an indent in which you could horizontally fit a thin cylinder. If you looked closer, you would see faint impressions of runes on the surface. The faint patterns were present on every metal piece that Quinn brought. Quinn squatted under absolute zero and placed the circular disc on the ground, and immediately it moved to calibrate itself to the 6 metal pieces around the vault. He went into his clothes and retrieved a small silk pouch. He loosened the string on the top and tilted the pouch for a thin gold cylinder to fall out. Quinn felt the weight of the gold cylinder in his hand for a moment before placing it in the indent of the circular disc. The metal moved around the gold cylinder and clutched it snugly. Getting up, Quinn moved away from the circular disc, walking towards the gate of the vault, and stood beside his cold clothes. With his finger raised, he shot a single burst of magic into the circular disc. Commencing the last phase, as Quinn said those words. The circular disc shot 6 beams of green light, 1 to every metal piece. The second the beam hit the 6 pieces, every piece shot similar beams to the others, connecting all to each other. Above in the air, the absolute zero showed activity as rings of icy-blue energy appeared around it. Every ring was made up of the cold energy from the intense energy of absolute zero. The temperature in the vault dropped as Quinn activated blood magic to protect himself, his hand crossed across his chest, observing every change with an eagle eye. The rings started to revolve and rotate faster around absolute zero. After a dozen seconds of acceleration and intense humming from the absolute zero, a laser of energy as thin as a human hair shot down at the circular disc, more specifically at the golden cylinder. Tick. It produced the sound when the energy hit the gold. Tick tick. Tick tick tick. Tick tick. Tick. With every hit on the gold cylinder, it produced a sound. The hair-thin energy kept hitting the gold cylinder for a few minutes before it finally stopped, and the rings of energy around absolute zero also absorbed back into it. The temperature also rose back to normal. Quinn waited for half a minute before uncrossing his arms and walking towards the circular disc. There was a cold fog around it, and the surrounding ground was also frozen. Too much energy was wasted. The concentration of the laser wasn't optimal. There was abundant leakage. I need to improve the design and rune formation for the next use, noted Quinn, as he observed the circular disc and the surrounding area. The gold cylinder detached itself from the circular disc as Quinn moved closer. Quinn looked at the gold, and as he expected, it wasn't frozen in ice layers. But the cold mist emanating showed that it was extremely cold. Quinn's mouth curved into a grin, and his eyes gleamed with delight. It worked. His eyes locked onto the gold cylinder floating above his hand. This marks the end of part 12 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.